Welcome to True Betrayal Stories, where secrets are exposed, lies unravel, and justice is served. If you love shocking betrayal stories and satisfying revenge, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss an update. My name is Richard. I'm 68 years old. I was married to Margaret for 43 years, and for most of that time, I thought I knew what forever looked like. We lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Burlington, Vermont, a house we'd built together, brick by brick, metaphorically and literally, a wraparound porch, a garden full of wildflowers, the kind of place people dream of retiring in. We had 3 kids. Emily, our oldest, lives a few towns over with her husband and twin boys. Mark works in San Francisco in tech, some job I still don't fully understand. And Daniel, our youngest, just made partner at his law firm in Boston. They grew up, built their own lives, and we couldn't be prouder. Holidays were loud, full of grandkids running wild and stories being retold for the 100th time. Margaret always said the noise was her favorite part. After I retired from teaching literature at the university, things slowed down in the best way. Our mornings were slow coffee and newspapers, afternoons in the garden or playing Scrabble at the kitchen table, evenings curled up with a book or old jazz records playing in the background. There were moments, simple ones, that still feel burned into me. Like that Sunday when we hosted all the kids. The house smelled like roast chicken and fresh bread. Margaret wore her favorite green sweater, the one with the little white buttons. She stood in the kitchen, covered in flour, laughing as Emily teased her for using the same gravy recipe since 1985. Or the way she still reached for my hand every time we crossed the street, like habit couldn't be unlearned. Even after all these years, she made everything feel steady, safe, familiar in the best possible way. One morning we sat on the porch with coffee, watching the fog lift off the lawn. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "We did all right, didn't we?" I kissed the top of her head and said, "Yeah, we really did." That was the kind of love we had, the kind that didn't need fireworks or grand gestures. It was baked into every corner of our lives. But sometimes as even the strongest walls can crack, quietly, without warning. It started with something small. I remember it so clearly. Margaret was making tea. The kettle whistled. She poured the hot water into her favorite blue mug, the one with the little chip on the handle. But when she reached for the honey, her hand trembled. Not just a twitch, more like a light shake. Enough for a few drops to spill onto the counter. I looked up. She noticed me noticing. She smiled. "Guess I'm getting clumsy. Or maybe you just need to cut back on caffeine," I joked. She laughed, waved me off. But it stuck with me. The next week, she missed a step going down the front porch and almost fell. I caught her in time. She brushed it off. The step's uneven, but I checked later. It wasn't. Then came the moment that really got to me. She was brushing her hair before bed. I was already under the covers, flipping through a book. She dropped the brush once, then again. On the third try, she just stood there, staring at it on the floor, like her hand and her brain weren't in sync anymore. I sat up. "You all right?" I asked. She blinked, bent down slowly, picked it up. "Yes," she said quietly, "just tired." But I knew something had shifted. We didn't talk about it that night. She climbed into bed beside me like always, curled into my side. I held her close, tighter than usual. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Leaves scraped along the driveway. Inside, I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering if this was how it started, if the life we built was about to change forever. We didn't go to the doctor right away. Margaret didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Said she was just tired, maybe low on electrolytes. You know how it is when you've been strong your whole life. Asking for help feels like admitting something you can't quite accept. But I couldn't shake it. The shaking, the stiffness, the way her eyes sometimes seemed to struggle to keep up with her words. So I called our family doctor and booked an appointment. She rolled her eyes when I told her, "You're making this bigger than it is, Richard. I'm fine. You dropped your toothbrush twice this morning. Because it's wet, it slipped." I didn't argue. I just quietly picked up my keys. The test took a couple of weeks. Blood work, neurological exams, brain scans. We sat together in that cold, windowless office with that fluorescent buzz above our heads. Margaret wore her favorite scarf, the one with the little sunflowers on it. She kept fidgeting with the edge of it as the doctor read through her chart. Then he looked up, took off his glasses and said it as gently as he could. "It's early onset Parkinson's." Margaret didn't say a word, just nodded. "Me?" I froze. I heard the words, but they didn't land. like they were floating in slow motion around the room and hadn't reached me yet. The doctor explained more. Dopamine, tremors, medication schedules, physical therapy, diet adjustments. His voice was calm, practiced. He'd done this before, but this was our first time hearing it, and it felt like getting hit in the chest with a 2-ton truck. When we got home that evening, she went straight to the bedroom and shut the door. I stood outside for a moment listening. No crying, no sound at all. I didn't go in. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, poured myself a glass of scotch, one I hadn't touched in over a year, and stared at nothing. That night, she finally spoke. "I'm not scared for me," she said softly, lying on her side facing the wall. "I'm scared for you. I don't want to be the reason you stop living." I slid into bed beside her, put my hand on her back. "You've been my reason for everything. Don't say that." We didn't say much after that, but we held each other, long and hard. Like we both knew that chapter 1 of something else had just begun. In the weeks that followed, I did what any husband would do. I read everything I could about Parkinson's, set reminders on my phone for her meds, cooked low-sodium, high-fiber meals, drove her to therapy, bought new rugs with rubber backing so she wouldn't slip. And I told the kids. They all took it hard. Emily offered to come by more often. Mark wanted to pay for an in-home nurse. Daniel, he just went quiet. That's how he processes things. I refused the nurse idea at first. "We don't need someone in our house," I said. "I can take care of her." And for a while I did. But Margaret started having more trouble. Buttoning shirts, lifting pots. Sometimes she'd get stuck halfway through a sentence and just stare at me like the word she wanted had disappeared. She hated being dependent, and I hated watching her struggle. One morning she tried to carry a basket of laundry up the stairs and fell. Not badly, just a few bruises. But that was the moment I knew. I couldn't do this alone anymore. The kids insisted. They found a reputable caregiving agency. We tried 2 women in the first month. One was sweet but clumsy, spilled soup on the carpet, and left bleach spots on our towels. The other was sharp, efficient, but cold as a freezer. Margaret hated her. Then came Isla. I remember the moment she walked through our door. She was wearing a simple white blouse tucked into black jeans, hair tied back, big brown eyes, a kind smile that didn't feel rehearsed. She was younger than I expected. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Most caregivers we interviewed were in their 50s or older. Isla felt different, lighter, not just physically, but in presence. "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," she said, shaking our hands. "Thank you for letting me come by." Her voice was soft, a little melodic, with a faint Spanish accent. But her English was fluent. She told us she'd worked with Parkinson's patients before, had a certification in elder care, used to be a nursing student but left school early to support her family. She said she believed in treating her clients like family. Margaret smiled more during that first interview than she had in weeks. After Isla left, Margaret looked at me and said, "I like her. She doesn't look at me like I'm dying." I nodded. "Let's bring her in on a trial." And just like that, Isla became part of our lives. She started part-time, mornings and afternoons, helped with bathing, cooking, medication, small chores. She worked quietly, efficiently, never overstepped, never made Margaret feel small. I watched her move around our home, careful and gentle, always humming some tune under her breath. She made Margaret laugh again, played soft music while doing physical therapy, got her to eat on days she refused everything I made. Margaret even joked once, "If I get too sick, you can just replace me with Isla. She runs the house better than I do." I laughed along, but something in my chest shifted. I couldn't name it yet, but I felt it. It started with the little things. A passing smile, a shared laugh over something silly Margaret said. Isla humming in the kitchen while chopping vegetables, and me realizing I was lingering longer than necessary just to hear her voice. She had a presence, warm, light, like a breeze that slipped through the windows unnoticed, but somehow made the whole room feel easier to breathe in. Margaret adored her. They'd chat for hours some days, about books, music, old movies. Isla sat beside her during lunch, listened to her stories even when they looped or lost direction. Never once did she show impatience. And Isla was good, genuinely good. The house was always clean, meals were warm, Margaret's skin looked healthier from the massage oils Isla used. I'd hear them giggle from the living room like 2 girlfriends, decades apart in age but close in spirit. I think she likes having a daughter again, Emily joked one afternoon during a visit. Better watch out, Dad. Isla's stealing your spot. We laughed, but something in me twisted at that. Because the truth was, Isla wasn't stealing anything. She was filling in the space I hadn't realized I'd left empty. The conversations between Isla and me started small. Polite questions. How was your day? Want me to make you coffee too, Mr. Whitmore? I always said yes. Then one night after Margaret had gone to bed early, her meds making her drowsy, we both ended up in the kitchen again. Late. Quiet. She was wiping down the counter. I was pouring a glass of water. The silence felt comfortable, like we'd done this 100 times. You should get some rest, I said. I like cleaning late, helps me think. About what? She glanced at me, half smiling. About how I ended up here, about where I'll go next. I nodded, unsure of what to say. She looked around the kitchen. This house, it feels like home. Most of the homes I work in don't. People don't talk to me. They just expect me to be invisible. You're not invisible here. She turned to me. There was a beat of silence. One heartbeat too long. I know, she said. That silence settled between us. Heavy, strange, electric. I left the room first. But from that night on, things shifted. I noticed her more. Noticed how she hummed when she was focused. How she always smelled faintly of something warm. Vanilla, maybe. How her fingers brushed mine when passing me a mug of tea. How she never backed away from my gaze. There was a moment, small but undeniable. I came back from the grocery store one afternoon. Margaret was asleep. Isla was in the living room folding laundry. She looked up and smiled. Her hair was down for once, falling loosely over her shoulders. You look tired, she said. Didn't sleep much last night. She gave me a long look. Not pity, something else. Something that said she understood without asking. You do too much. I'm just trying to keep everything from falling apart. You don't have to carry all of it, Richard. There it was again. That quiet invitation, that door cracking open just an inch. That night I lay awake next to Margaret, her breathing soft, steady. I stared at the ceiling, replaying Isla's voice in my head. You don't have to carry all of it. I didn't sleep at all. The next few days I tried to keep busy. Took on more chores. Mowed the lawn even though it didn't need mowing. Reorganized the garage. But I kept catching myself looking for her. Listening for her. And Isla? She didn't push. But she didn't pull away either. One evening Margaret had a rough day. Tremors worse than usual. Couldn't keep food down. Isla stayed late. Helped clean her up. Got her into bed. I watched from the hallway as she adjusted Margaret's blanket. Whispered something soft in her ear. When she stepped out, I was still standing there. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Thanks for staying. I wasn't going to leave her like that. There was a long pause. You should go rest, I said, voice low. She smiled, and you say that every night. And then for the first time, she reached out, just lightly, her hand brushing my arm. It was quick, barely anything. But it felt like everything. Later that night, I stood in the kitchen alone, holding the mug she left in the sink. I don't know how long I stayed there, just staring at it, because something had begun, quiet, slow, like the first crack in a frozen lake. And I knew deep down, if I didn't step back now, I might fall through. But I didn't. I kept walking closer to the edge. It happened on a Wednesday night. Margaret had gone to bed early, exhausted from a day full of tremors and stiff joints. She barely touched her dinner. Isla helped her undress, guided her into bed, pulled the covers up, and kissed her forehead like she always did, like a daughter would. I stood at the doorway, watching. Isla turned off the bedroom light and stepped out into the hallway. Our eyes met. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But we both lingered. It was around 11 p.m. when I came back downstairs. I couldn't sleep. The weight in my chest kept pressing harder, like something inside me was trying to scream. I wasn't surprised to find her in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table in an oversized cardigan, her hair tied up messily, sipping on chamomile tea. She looked up when she saw me and smiled. Soft, knowing. You too, huh? Yeah, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Insomnia's been winning lately. She slid the teapot toward me. Still warm. I poured a cup and sat across from her. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was something else. Charged, fragile. She spoke first. I used to be afraid of silence. Growing up, silence meant something was wrong. A fight coming, someone leaving. Now I kind of welcome it. I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. My fingers tapped the side of the mug. She glanced at me, her voice quiet but steady. Do you ever feel lonely, even when someone's right there next to you? I met her eyes. All the time. It just came out, no hesitation. And maybe I should have stopped there. Maybe I should have gotten up, said goodnight, gone back to bed. But I didn't. Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing, I admitted. Like parts of me are dying before I do. Isla set her mug down gently, her voice barely above a whisper. You're not alone in that. We just sat there. Two people from different worlds, different generations, bound by something unspoken, something dangerous. And then she reached across the table. Her fingers brushed mine, not by accident. I looked down at our hands. I should have pulled away, but instead, I turned my hand over, laced my fingers with hers. My pulse pounded in my ears, my throat tightened. She stood up slowly, walked around the table, and stopped just inches from me. I looked up at her, every nerve in my body screaming both run and stay. She whispered, we don't have to do this. But she didn't move. Neither did I. I know, I said, and then I stood. We were face to face now. I could see the way her chest rose and fell, how her eyes searched mine, looking for something. Permission, reassurance, maybe just proof that she wasn't the only one feeling this. I reached up, brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. And then I kissed her. It was gentle at first, careful, like we both knew we were crossing a line and still couldn't stop ourselves. But then it deepened, grew desperate, raw. She pulled me closer. I pressed her against the counter. For those few moments, the world fell away. The years, the guilt, the vows, the disease, all of it vanished. And I hated myself for how right it felt. When we finally broke apart, she didn't speak. Her lips were red, her breathing shallow. She looked shaken, so was I. I'm sorry, I said, backing away. I shouldn't have. She shook her head. You don't have to say anything. She stepped back, her eyes avoiding mine. And then she turned and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there alone for a long time, gripping the edge of the counter like it might keep me from falling apart. Upstairs, Margaret was asleep, peaceful, oblivious. I climbed the stairs like a man walking to his own execution. Every creak in the wood felt like a confession. Every shadow, a judgment. When I lay down next to her, she stirred a little, murmured something I couldn't make out, then reached for my hand under the blanket. I froze, but I let her take it, and I stared at the ceiling for hours. Because I knew what I had done, and I knew I wasn't going to stop. It didn't take long for one kiss to become two. Two became four. Four became something we didn't even try to count anymore. It was like a dam had cracked open. All the pressure, the loneliness, the silence, everything I'd bottled up over the years came pouring out. The first time it happened, really happened, was 3 nights after that kiss. Margaret had gone to sleep early. The meds hit her hard that day. She'd barely spoken at dinner, just nodded and smiled weakly when Isla helped her into bed. I was on the porch sipping bourbon, wrapped in a blanket. The night was quiet, cool, still. I didn't hear Isla come out, but I felt her sit beside me. I didn't think you'd talk to me again, she said softly. I wasn't planning to, I admitted. We sat there for a long while, saying nothing. Then I turned to her. I can't stop thinking about you. She didn't look surprised, just sad. Neither can I. We kissed again, but this time it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't careful. It was need. The kind that made me forget where I was, who I was. We ended up in the guest room, hands fumbling, breath short, her skin warm under mine. Every second felt like drowning and not wanting to be saved. When it was over, we lay there in the dark, the air between us heavy and silent. I should go, she whispered. I nodded but didn't move. She dressed quietly and slipped back into her room. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep the next one either, because it didn't stop there. We kept finding moments. In the laundry room, in the garage. Even once, God help me, in the downstairs bathroom while Margaret was napping in the recliner. I knew it was wrong. Every second screamed it. But every second also made me feel alive. Isla never pushed, never asked for more. But her eyes, they said it. She was falling for me. And somewhere inside all that chaos, I was falling too. Not in love. No, it wasn't that. It was escape. It was drowning together. But even in the deepest parts of our betrayal, the world outside kept turning. Margaret started getting worse. She forgot what day it was. Sometimes she'd forget where she was altogether. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found her staring at a cup of coffee like it was a foreign object. She looked up and said, "I think I'm supposed to know you, but I can't remember your name right now." I smiled, sat beside her, and took her hand. "It's Richard, sweetheart." She smiled back, small and unsure. "That's a nice name." My heart shattered. That night, I told Isla we needed to stop. She nodded. But the next night, it happened again. Because stopping was easier said than done. Then came the guilt. It hit me in waves, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes when Isla laughed at something and Margaret from across the room looked confused, like she'd missed a joke she didn't know was being told. And other times, it hit when Margaret would look at me with absolute love, pure and childlike, and say, "I'm so lucky to have you." Each time it felt like my insides were rotting, but I didn't stop. Because I was selfish. Because part of me believed I could keep balancing both worlds. Until one day, Margaret looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "I had a dream last night that you were walking away from me, and I was calling your name, but you didn't hear me." I froze. She smiled like it was just some sweet little thing, but I couldn't breathe. That night, I didn't touch Isla. I sat by Margaret's bed and held her hand until she fell asleep. Then I stayed there, in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Because the dream wasn't hers. It was mine. And it was coming true. It all came crashing down on a rainy afternoon. Emily had said she might stop by that weekend with the twins, but I didn't expect her that day. Isla and I had let our guard down. Margaret was asleep upstairs, the rain tapping gently on the windows, and Isla was in the kitchen with me. Too close, smiling too much. I reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, and she didn't flinch. She leaned into my hand, my fingers lingered, and that's when I heard the front door open. The sound of little feet running across the hardwood floor. A child's voice calling, "Grandpa!" Then a pause. A long, deafening pause. I turned slowly to find Emily standing in the archway, holding a grocery bag in one hand and her umbrella in the other. Her eyes locked onto mine, then shifted to Isla, then back to me. Her face went pale. The twins stood behind her, confused by the tension, looking up at her silently. "Wow, Mommy," one of them whispered. Emily didn't speak. Her lips pressed tight, her breathing quick and shallow. Then she dropped the grocery bag. It hit the floor with a thud, apples rolling out in all directions. Isla stepped back from me, eyes wide in shock. "Emily," I started, but she spun around and marched straight out the door. I chased after her into the rain. "Emily, wait, please." She turned around in the driveway, soaked, her hair plastered to her face. "Are you serious right now? Are you out of your fucking mind, Dad? Let me explain." "Explain? Explain what? That you're cheating on Mom while she's dying? With her caregiver?" "It wasn't like that." "Don't. Just don't. I don't even know who you are." Her voice cracked, and tears started mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "My whole life I thought you were this steady, strong, decent man. But you're just another old guy who couldn't keep it in his pants. God, how pathetic. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't plan. But you let it happen, over and over again. And now what? You think we're just going to pretend nothing's wrong?" She walked back to the car, yanked the door open, shoved the twins inside. As she climbed in, she looked at me one last time. "Don't come near Mom again, and don't you dare show your face around my kids." Then she slammed the door. The car peeled out of the driveway. I stood in the rain, soaked, frozen, ashamed. When I walked back inside, Isla was already packing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should go. I didn't want it to happen like this." She looked at me, eyes red but dry. "It was never going to end any other way, Richard." I watched her leave, her bag over her shoulders shaking slightly. She didn't look back. I stood in the hallway alone, the silence ringing in my ears. An hour later, Mark called. I just got off the phone with Emily. "Mark, please." "You don't talk, you listen." His voice was shaking with fury. "You're lucky Mom doesn't understand what's going on. Because if she did, it would kill her." I know I messed up." "You didn't just mess up, you betrayed her. You betrayed all of us, our family." He hung up. I sat in the kitchen staring at the cup of tea Ayla had left half full on the counter. Then the agency called. "We received a report from your daughter, Mr. Whitmore. Based on what's been shared, we're terminating the contract with Miss Isla effective immediately, and we'll be notifying the caregiving board." Just like that, Isla was done. Her job, her reputation, gone. And I was left alone. Margaret didn't say much the next few days. She was quiet, still, almost too still. I caught her looking at me once, eyes glassy, unfocused, but for a moment it felt like she knew, like some deep instinct in her could sense what had happened. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because the silence in the house now was unbearable, and I had no one left to blame but myself. The house didn't feel like home anymore. Not without Isla's humming in the kitchen, not without the sound of Emily's boys racing down the hallway, not without laughter, or footsteps, or life. Just silence. Margaret barely spoke now. Some days she'd sit for hours staring out the window, blinking slowly, lost somewhere I couldn't reach. Other days she didn't get out of bed at all. I still cared for her, still did everything I was supposed to, but the air between us had changed. It was heavy, cold, like she could feel the betrayal even if her mind didn't fully grasp it. One morning I was helping her into her cardigan when she turned and looked me straight in the eyes. Her voice was quiet, slurred. "You've been sad lately." I froze. She didn't say anything else, just looked at me with that faint, distant smile. And it hit me harder than any screaming accusation ever could. Margaret never needed to catch me. She felt it. The worst part, I deserved it. Emily hadn't returned any of my calls. Mark sent me a single text. "You're lucky Mom doesn't understand what happened. We won't be visiting anymore." Daniel didn't say anything, just disappeared. The friends who used to drop by on weekends suddenly had other things going on. Even the neighbors stopped waving. I became invisible in my own life. I started waking up at 4 a.m. just to avoid looking at myself in the mirror. Every night I sat at the dining table long after Margaret had gone to sleep. The chair across from me empty. The plate untouched. Just me, and the ghost of everything I destroyed. One night I opened the junk drawer in the kitchen and found an old notepad. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not for anyone in particular, just for the people I'd hurt. I tore it out, folded it twice, and tucked it under the sugar jar on the kitchen counter. To the family I wrote, "I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. One I made over and over, knowing it would hurt you. I wasn't seduced. I wasn't manipulated. I was weak. And I let that weakness destroy the only thing that ever truly mattered to me. Margaret, you gave me a life full of love. You trusted me with your body, your heart, your mind, even as it began to betray you. And I betrayed you first. To my children, you deserve better. A better role model, a better man. I taught you about loyalty, about honor, and I failed to live by those same words. I'm leaving this house not to escape judgment. God knows I've lived with it every night, but because I don't belong here anymore. If I could trade places with her, I would, but all I can do now is go. I'm sorry for all of it. And Dad." That night I packed a small bag, just the essentials, a change of clothes, toothbrush, a few family photos. Nothing more. I checked on Margaret one last time. She was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady, her hands curled into soft fists. I whispered, "I love you," even though I didn't deserve to say it. Then I walked out the front door. I didn't slam it, didn't lock it. I just left. The air was crisp, the sky above me wide and indifferent. And for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not because I missed Isla, not because I lost my children, but because I had no one else to blame now. The punishment had already begun, and it was quiet. So quiet. When Emily came back to the house 2 days after Richard left, she didn't know what to expect. The front door was unlocked. The place was silent. She walked into the kitchen, still half angry, half exhausted. A cup sat on the counter, cold tea inside. A chair pushed back like someone had stood up in a hurry. Then she saw it. A folded piece of paper tucked under the sugar jar, her name written faintly on the corner. She hesitated. Then she picked it up, unfolded it, and began to read. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just stood there in the quiet kitchen, the late afternoon sun slanting across the counter, and read every line in silence. When she reached the end, she folded it again, slowly like it might fall apart in her hands. Then she walked down the hallway and into her mother's room. Margaret was awake, sitting propped up with a pillow behind her back. Her eyes were tired but alert. Emily sat down at the edge of the bed. "Dad left a letter," she said gently. "Do you want to hear it?" Margaret didn't speak, but she gave the faintest nod. Emily didn't read it out loud. Instead, she handed it over. Margaret took it with slightly trembling fingers, unfolded it, and read in silence. It took a long time. When she was done, she set it on her lap. She didn't sob, didn't yell. but a single tear slid down her cheek, tracing the deep line near her jaw before falling onto the edge of the sheet. I already knew, she whispered. Not everything, but enough. Emily looked down ashamed. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have told you sooner. I should have... No, Margaret interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. He told me now. That's enough. She looked out the window, where the sky was beginning to turn orange. I just didn't want to leave this world with lies between us. She closed her eyes. That night, Margaret didn't ask for dinner. She didn't ask for music or tea or help brushing her hair. She just lay still, holding Emily's hand in one of hers, and the letter in the other. She passed away before sunrise, peacefully. The funeral was quiet and dignified. Friends from the neighborhood came. Old colleagues, Margaret's sister from Oregon. The kids stood together, close, holding on to one another like pieces of a house, slowly trying to stay standing without its foundation. They didn't speak Richard's name, but he came, dressed in gray, cap low, silent among the trees that lined the edge of the cemetery. He didn't approach the casket, didn't look at the family. He waited until they were all gone. Only then did he walk slowly to her grave. Fresh soil still damp, flowers laid carefully across the top, her picture in a silver frame, young, vibrant, joyful. Richard dropped to his knees, and the tears came, not the quiet kind, not restrained. He wept. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. Then louder, I'm so sorry, Maggie. He pressed a hand to the edge of the grave, like he might feel her warmth one last time through the earth. I loved you. I never stopped. I failed you. The wind rustled the leaves above, the cemetery empty around him. He stayed until the sun dipped behind the hill, and then slowly he stood, wiped his eyes, and walked away. Now he lives in a small apartment with no sound but the tick of the kitchen clock. He wakes early, eats the same breakfast, talks to no one. Sometimes he walks past parks they once visited. Sometimes he hears a song in a cafe that makes his chest tighten, but no one knows who he is. And maybe that's the point. He doesn't look at old photos, doesn't follow the kids on social media. He doesn't expect calls, doesn't check the mailbox. He just exists, quiet, alone, carrying a silence heavier than any sentence a courtroom could have given him. What do you think? Did Richard suffer enough? Or are there some betrayals that echo far beyond the grave? Let us know in the comments. Let us know in the comments below. And if you love stories of shocking betrayal and cold, satisfying revenge, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update from True Betrayal Stories. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.